Welcome to Fandora's Box. This is the podcast where we talk about our favorite fandoms in terms of our thoughts, theories, opinions. We like to do a little production analysis as well as story dissection. My name is Tyler Gardner, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Christian Almonte.
Yo, welcome back, everybody. Shouts out to Seattle, Washington. I've never been there or have any desire to be there.
West Coast represent.
But I just felt like shouting you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep on whatever you're doing.
Yeah, all right. Let's get into this. I hear we're going to learn some more about the lightsaber force.
Yes, this is the second episode of our lightsaber journey. The last episode, we talked about the specifics of the mechanics within a lightsaber. We also talked about the different lightsaber forms, like the physical, mechanical forms. And we also talked about crystals. Christian, do you have any questions about what we went over last time?
Questions?
On Pandora's Box.
I have to add questions.
I didn't come here to question your questions. Ah!
I have a question. No, you've been, my good friend, you have been very concise with what we have so far. I feel as though I'm a babe in the woods when it comes to these things, and I've been a fan of Star Wars since I was a wee lad. So it's always an interesting thing when you uncover something brand new. But we have even more to go, and you've given me a quick off camera. You've given me a quick preview of what the coming attractions. So I gotta say,
I whetted your appetite.
Yeah, I'm pretty ecstatic. So let's get into it, my friend.
Yes, as a special request from Christian, he asked me to go over the rituals kind of surrounding a lightsaber.
Yeah, because what we see a lot of stuff in, in what mediums that we already have in terms of visuals. You know, we're treated to a lot of lightsaber fights. We're treated to a lot of people wielding lightsabers and, talking about the importance of lightsabers. This is your life. Things of that nature. But we never see, rituals in terms of, like, them getting passed down, them going out to do, the tasks required of them to acquire a lightsaber. Mm-hmm. We've never seen, like, other than it being a standardized weapon, there's a lot more that goes into it, and I really wanted to learn more in terms of, what actually ritualistically happens when someone receives a lightsaber.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great point. It was something interesting. It was something I hadn't actually, not that I didn't consider putting it in, but it wasn't something I was going to focus on. But then, as soon as you brought it up, I said, it makes a lot of sense. This weapon, as you said, is a Jedi's life. It's very important. We've already seen how important it is for people that build them, especially in the example of Darth Maul, the literal blood, sweat, and tears he put into creating his lightsaber. So yeah, it would make sense that there are rituals surrounding the lightsabers. There are rituals for different things involving a lightsaber. There are two that specifically involve the lightsaber itself. But we're going to talk about at least three that I know of that I came across. And if you're ready, I'm ready to dive back in.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Let's do it. Lightsaber rituals. The lightsaber is a very personal matter for both Jedi and Sith. Both two opposite ends of the spectrum in the personal, but I think they both show similarities in how they're made. Both Jedi and Sith go through the same motions, the same practices of creating it. Obviously, just for their different the different sides of the Force they represent. Lightsabers were created by each individual. There are a few cases of mass productions of lightsaber. It was very tough to mass produce lightsabers simply because
I'm actually shocked that there were any instances.
Well, yeah. There was actually, it didn't really happen until, I would say, post-Republic. I mean, it happened a little bit pre-Republic, more in times of Revan and things like that, especially when you had this mass creation of Sith, because a lot of times the Sith came from the Jedi, so they would either get rid of their lightsaber altogether. Sometimes they were altered, but a lot of times you were given a brand new Sith lightsaber. You didn't create your own. This is what you got when you came out of the temple. And then in Expanded Universe, post-Episode 6, they had found a way to actually mass-produce lightsabers. Again, it was for the dark side users, but they figured out a way. But there was a lot of intricacies to the technology, which made it very, very tough to actually mass-produce them as it was.
Weapons of mass production.
Let's see. So, the rituals that surround the lightsaber are two. There are
two.
Yeah.
That name keeps popping up.
Oh yeah. We just had a friend play as a character in one of our Dungeons and Dragons sessions who
named R2.
Yes.
And he only communicates in beeps because his tongue's cut out.
Yeah.
I don't know why the name keeps popping up, but that's why we found it funny.
On that gory note.
Yeah.
So one of the rituals is actually something we see in the Clone Wars. Christian is not, because he refuses to watch the rest of the Clone Wars for some reason. But we're going to keep pushing him towards the end.
Well, the way that I would have to do it is I would have to rewatch from season 1.
Is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, but it's an undertaking.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I gotta be prepped. I'm in the middle of, not to get into life stuff, but I am in the middle of moving and all this shit. So.
But to get into life stuff.
But to get into life stuff. But I promise, for the sake of the podcast, I will be, catching up with Bad Batch, catching up with all the things that we would want to discuss on this podcast, and I believe we fully prepared.
Quick talks about maybe going into the Bad Batch for our next episode, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It's we got a lot of stuff coming.
Who knows anything?
March 1st is the new Mandalorian season, so we got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So there's definitely gonna be some activity in the fandom for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Most definitely.
In the Clone Wars, they actually portrayed what was called the Gathering. The Gathering itself, and for those who have seen this episode or a couple of episodes of the Clone Wars, it was actually an arc. But for those who saw it, I want you to understand that was created for that show. It was not like that up until that episode was produced. Normally, how lightsaber crystals were obtained, we spoke about it in our last episode, but master and apprentice pairs would almost always, universally would go and get the apprentice's lightsaber. The Gathering shows it, and there's a couple reasons why I think it made sense actually for the way they did it. They created this thing called the Gathering, which was a group of Padawans who was flown to the planet Alum. They were watched over by Ahsoka Tano, and the entire thing was monitored by Master Yoda.
Oh, actually, I might have actually seen this.
Yeah,
because I remember, because they were all young.
Yeah.
Padawans.
Well, that was the first thing. They were all Padawans. They didn't have masters.
Honestly, where I had stopped, because I think I remember that, but I don't remember how it ended.
Yeah, that was
because they had to fight raiders or whatever.
Yeah, they had to fight the pirates.
Yeah. Okay, so I did see it.
Yeah, so that in itself was different. Padawans wouldn't have any need for a lightsaber. However, as we know, this was in the midst of the Clone Wars, so there was a lot of changes that the Jedi Order made to basically militarize itself and make it much more militant. And one of them was they kind of had to push these Padawans to be more battle ready. Even though, especially this group of Padawans within the show, they did not have masters. They were Padawans, they were not apprentices. So that was uncommon. It was uncommon for a masterless Padawan to have their own fully utilized lightsaber, because part of that is because you weren't guaranteed an apprenticeship. And if you weren't guaranteed an apprenticeship by the time you're 13-year-old, you were actually kicked out of the Jedi Order. A lot of times they were sent off to different parts of the Jedi Order, like you had the Agricultural Corps, or they were sent off to support the Republic in different ways. But you weren't made a Jedi.
Oh, so they were like excommunicated?
Not excommunicated. You wouldn't continue on your path as a Jedi. If a master did not pick you, you went to do other things. I think sometimes you could just leave behind. But since you didn't have your lightsaber, you didn't build your lightsaber until you became an apprentice. You wouldn't be just some dude who knew a little bit of Force stuff running around with a lightsaber. So I think that was part of the reasoning behind that. Which is why it didn't fully make sense for this group of Padawans. The only reasoning I can put in is, as we talked about, the war changed a lot of things. So you have the Gathering, which is this group of Padawans, and or we can call it just the Master Apprentice team, obtaining the crystal that is to be used in the lightsaber. That is one ritual. The show portrayed the actual obtaining of the crystals very, very well. It is exactly how normally would happen. They would be some sort of trials. They would associate visions. As we talked about in the last episode, the crystal would pick its user, which is pretty cool. So that's one ritual. Lightsaber ritual. We'll call it the Gathering because that was a name given to it by the creators of the Clone Wars series.
Can I interlude with a question real quick?
Of course.
So you had mentioned that there can be multiple crystals in every single lightsaber hilt.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that you have to go through that process numerous times, or in that same batch can multiple crystals want you?
So you can utilize more, we'll say, normal crystal. Normal crystals for the other things, because you have the main crystal, as we saw in the illustration of the cutaway. You have the primary crystal, which we can assume was the crystal that was obtained in the cave of Alum.
Yeah.
And then you have the focusing crystal, and then you have the focusing crystal activators. Those are actually little crystals themselves. So I believe those could be kind of mass-produced, kind of utilized. They might even come from the big crystal that you pick. You can chop it up into different parts.
Okay.
But it was the primary.
So those ones don't necessarily have to choose you.
They're not as singular.
Understood.
So we have the Gathering. Another ritual that doesn't necessarily pertain to the lightsaber itself, but it involves the lightsaber, is what's called the knighting ceremony. Christian has it on the top right. That is actually the knighting ceremony of Anakin Skywalker. A knighting ceremony is performed by any Jedi who passes their trials and moves on from apprentice to knight. And it is done exactly in this way. It is overseen by the Grand Master of the Order, who everybody knows is Yoda.
So to kind of illustrate what I have in front of me, this it's the main council of Jedi. They're all standing with their lightsabers, much like the swords of the ring wraiths when they have it presented up very, very knightly, like kings.
And all the ones that are holding their lightsaber have their hoods up as well.
Except for fucking Yoda in the corner. What he's doing?
Yoda is the proctor. So
okay.
Yeah, he's different. He has a different role in this ceremony. This scene is actually for anybody who saw the really old, the original Clone Wars series from like 2001, 2002.
Cartoon one.
Yeah, from that one. That has a lot of good stories as well, but this is when the first portrayal of this knighting ceremony. But it is safe to assume that every single apprentice that became a Jedi Knight went through the same ordeal. It was pretty cool. It was just swearing in, and it ends with the overseer, Yoda, cutting the Padawan braid, or the apprentice braid, from the now Knight. So they sever their Padawan braids at this point, or at least in Anakin. Anakin had his lightsaber at this point anyways, because he was apprenticed to Obi-Wan. Apprentices will have their own lightsabers, and then it just utilizes the lightsaber. Not really about the lightsabers, more about the Jedi itself.
Very cool. I wish they'd show this a little bit more often.
It's really cool.
It seems really nice.
It is really, really cool. It's funny enough, we actually...
Because no one knows in the course of the movies, I would never have assumed that that's what happens to their ponytail.
Yeah, that gets cut off.
I would never have had, because it's never procluded to. It's never demonstrated.
Yeah. I think this would have been really cool because you would have seen this ceremony a lot more during the Clone Wars, because just as in the Gathering, they pushed these Padawans to be more battle ready, they actually sped up a lot of apprentices' knighthood. So I would say in the last 1,000 years, from 1000 BBY to 21 BBY, you would have seen this ceremony a lot more frequently during the Clone Wars, simply because they were knighting these apprentices simply because they needed more Jedi Knights in the front lines.
Kind of like when Obi-Wan says, he's ready for the trials, it's more like people were pushing people for the trials more and more often.
Well, that was different because that was in episode 1. I am ready for the trials. And at that point, they were much more strict about who was ready for the trials. Yeah. You have to understand, in episode 1, Obi-Wan was a 25-year-old man. Yeah. He had been with Qui-Gon for the last 12, 13 years.
G at that point.
Yeah, so I don't think he was wrong. And then actually...
Well, then Yoda says, agreed we are that... Whatever he says.
His own council, the council will hold on who is ready for the trials. Yeah, Yoda tells him, it's like, you don't tell us that you're ready, we'll tell you that you're ready. What ended up happening actually with Obi-Wan was his trial was actually killing Darth Maul. They knighted him the day that he killed Darth Maul and Qui-Gon died. Simply because it's like, well, yeah, the trials would offer you a pretty comparable challenge to, I don't know, killing a Sith Lord. That sounds about right. So, I think that was very appropriate. The trials are something totally different. We'll get into a different episode.
Man, that was that actually his trial?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's what made him a Jedi.
I mean, that's almost impossible for other people to. I mean, the Jedi, the Sith at that point had been extinct for a long time.
It's not like there's a rubric of like, what do you have to do to become a Jedi Knight? You go through the trial. The trial can be any sort of thing.
So the trials aren't a set in stone task. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Nope.
I thought the trials were like a specifically set labyrinthian path that they had to take.
As individual and experience it is building and obtaining one's lightsaber and lightsaber crystal, the trials are just as individual.
So Obi-Wan's is vastly different than Ki-Adi-Mundi's. Ki-Adi-Mundi's is vastly different from Mace Windu's.
That's why it was appropriate, because they say anything that the challenges you would face in any given trial would be on par with fighting and killing a Sith Lord. That seems appropriate to be like, why wouldn't we knight you?
Yeah.
You've made it.
There's no greater challenge.
Essentially, yeah. It's like, that makes sense. You overcame a monumental challenge, which is essentially what a trial is. It's to show if you're ready or not.
Yeah, in the law of the two. Okay.
The third ritual that we're going to be going over, and this one also pertains directly to the lightsaber itself, is called the Concordance of Fealty. Now, Christian raised an interesting point at the end of our last episode when he talked about Mace Windu's color in his lightsaber. This Concordance of Fealty was actually put in, I don't think it's retcon, but I don't know the word is for when you fix it afterwards. Not change it, but add something to a canon.
Adapted?
Yeah, sure. This was adapted for this because in episode 1, And we didn't see it in the movies, but we saw it with the action figures that came out for episode 1. Mace Windu had a blue lightsaber. And we do know that when episode 2 came around during production, Samuel L. Jackson wanted a purple one. Well, it needed to be explained why kids who bought an action figure in 1999 and 2000, 2001 with Mace Windu having a blue lightsaber, how come on screen in the second episode he has a purple lightsaber? This concordance of fealty was created for this reason. The concordance of fealty is a Jedi tradition of exchanging lightsabers with another Jedi. The exchange symbolizes a sacred bond of mutual trust in each person that is exchanging lightsaber. It is very rarely practiced, and it's almost exclusively practiced by Jedi Masters. Mace Windu and Eeth Koth performed this ritual, which this right here, him trading lightsabers with Eeth Koth. Eeth Koth had a blue lightsaber. This happened during the time of episode 1, so this is explaining why he had a blue lightsaber during the time of episode 1. They would actually use it. There was no specific time for how long they would switch lightsabers, but they would essentially switch lightsabers.
How is it that people thought that he had a blue lightsaber when we never saw Mace Windu's lightsaber in the first one?
So you have merchandise that comes out with the movie. They had action figures that came out on par with the same time of episode 1, and Mace Windu got an action figure that had a blue lightsaber. A lot like mass produced. It wasn't like a one-off. Like every single.
Gotcha.
Every single.
It's because he was shown physically, so they had his.
Yeah, because in the movie he
appearance.
did. Yeah, in the movie we didn't know what color lightsaber he had.
No, because none of them used the lightsaber.
But when you see him in this action figure, he's wielding the blue one. So to explain that, and now why in episode 2, when he's on screen, he has a different colored lightsaber, like distinctly different, not like, oh, maybe it's a variation. No, different. In episode 1, he was actually holding on to Eeth Koth's lightsaber, and Eeth Koth had Mace Windu's lightsaber, because they were both practicing this concordance of fealty. Right. They would utilize each other's lightsabers, because we all know from episode 2, and you said it and I've said it, this weapon is your life. They were exchanging each other's lives with each other as a show of mutual trust. And it actually would strengthen that trust as well. So if anybody has an action figure dating from 1999 to 2001, 2002 that has Mace Windu utilizing a blue lightsaber, this is why. Mm-hmm. Because at the time he had Eeth Koth's lightsaber and not his own.
Understood.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions about the specifics of lightsabers, lightsaber crystals, or rituals before we move on?
I'm just happy to get more details about the lightsaber ritual. It is strange though, because like you were mentioning, they kind of altered it a little bit with the gathering for the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. I would be kind of interested to understand. It's probably not even written out there, but just how that all transpired.
What?
The alteration for it to be expedited because of the Clone Wars. That whole process to like get these Padawans underway fast, because they had battalions of droids at the door and very few.
Well, that's why. Because before it would be individual teams of master, apprentice, one at a time, going off whenever, and they couldn't wait.
Well, I understand that. I just want to know like when I want to like kind of. It would be cool to see like the scene where they were like, all right,
discussing
this is what we're gonna do. Yeah.
It probably happened. So we talked about this a little bit when we discussed the history of the galaxy.
Yeah.
The first year of the Clone Wars was essentially the Republic.
Which, if you haven't seen that podcast episode, go see that one as well.
Yeah. Good plugging.
Do my best.
We make our own ads for our own products. To keep it real. So, yeah, during that episode, we discussed how the first year of the Clone Wars showed the Republic just essentially militarizing itself because it wasn't ready for war. It was not ready for war until, like, the week or two before the Clone Wars actually started. And then they needed to prepare... I don't even know everything that you would need, staging grounds or staging planets, finding out who the fuck is on your team now because the galaxy, the Republic has been split in fucking half.
Yeah, the Jedi had no fucking idea.
The Jedi were the farthest ones behind. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that too later on, but yeah, they were so far behind the curve because they're not a military order. They weren't from the beginning, but now all of a sudden they're but now they're pushed into a role. Not only were they involved, but they were leading it. They were generals.
They're generals.
Yep. So there was a lot of things they had to change. A lot of things they had to change, and one of them was this expedition of moving people through the ranks to get them able to be pushed into the front lines. They're still trying to observe tradition, but still kind of keep up with what the hell is going on around them. Because unfortunately, they're not cut off. They were so entwined with the Republic, they didn't have a choice. Mm-hmm. Which that's a different topic for a different day.
Fair enough.
Anything else before we move on?
I think that was good.
Excellent. We are now going to go into the timeline history of the lightsaber itself.
Nothing.
For you saucy little lore whores.
You said that in Star Trek, by the way. Yeah, I'm a lore whore.
Yeah, I absolutely am. 25,000 BBY, there were no lightsabers, straight swords.
Straight fucking swords.
So we have the beginnings of the Jedi Order called the Jedi Order.
The Jedi.
Well, that's literally what it was called. The Jedi Order. It wasn't the Jedi Order.
Oh, I thought you were speaking like the Toydarians.
No. I'm actually saying it. I'm saying real thing.
And the Jedi?
Yeah, Jedi Order.
Fair enough.
They utilized swords, or they utilized force-imbued staffs and things of that nature. When the dark side started to influence Jedi followers, and then you have dark Jedi and light Jedi, they were fighting sword versus sword. The only thing we have similar to a lightsaber, and this was brought in or adapted for this time period when the Dawn of the Jedi series came out, which is, I believe, a book series and a comic series. It's okay. I think they were a one-off, and I'm glad they didn't continue it because it really fucked things up, and it was just kind of dumb, in my opinion. But anybody who wants to is welcome to Dawn of the Jedi. Look into that. You'll see a lot more of what we're talking about now. 25,000 BBY, while everybody else is using swords, there were these things called Force Sabers, which were force-powered frozen laser technology, which was developed by the Rakata fuckers. Just kidding, it's just the Rakata, not the Rakata fuckers.
But wait, like, I specify that. But am I understanding correctly where the Rakata were still deep in the uncharted territories of space?
This was during their... They developed their own technology. They worked with what back then it was called frozen laser technology. They knew they had blasters and shit like that. And again, this was all adapted very roughly because this only came upon during this book series. So I figured I'd have to put it in case somebody was like, "What about this?" This was not canonically a thing for lightsabers until this book series came out, which was a number of years ago. Not a number of years ago, but I mean it was. But anyways.
Gotcha.
It worked. It didn't work like a normal lightsaber. There's not a whole lot of information about the mechanics behind this force saber, but it was force powered, so you had to be able to use the force in order to activate it and use it. It wasn't mechanical. Like anybody could pick up a normal lightsaber and push the button and use it, but with these ones, you specifically had to utilize the force to activate it.
Yeah, frozen laser is just an antonym.
Yeah.
But interesting.
And also in 25,000 BBY, we have what is called the first known lightsaber, which was the first blade. I've got a little link up here. The first blade. I believe this came out because of the...
Chick-fil-A ad.
This was introduced during the Coder MMORPG. This was the first blade in Ancient Weapon that served as the foundation for all modern lightsabers. Again, this was adapted at a certain point. Yeah, there it is, Jedi. You know, it's designed by an ancient Jedi master known as the Weapon Master.
J-E''DAII.
Yep, Jedi. First blade was originally crafted by a Jedi called the Weapon Master on Tython during the Force Wars, which was 25,000 BBY.
Was that the one where the Rakata were coming through the Force, like, space?
What?
Remember, because they had to be...
No, Force Wars was Jedi versus Dark Jedi.
Okay.
25,000 BBY, first blade. Lightsaber technology did not advance for 10,000 years. They were not utilized. Most people used swords because blasters were also not really a big thing, so there wasn't anything to consider about. 15,500 BBY, we see the first true advancements of lightsaber technology. At 15,000 BBY, the research into lightsaber technology was then called frozen blaster technology because at this point blasters were more widely used and widely produced. They led to the first usable form of lightsaber. However, these early lightsabers were very unstable, and they required a fuck ton of energy to power them. So instead of having that...
Kylo Ren's incredible.
Yeah, so instead of the diateum power cell that the more normal current modern lightsabers have, these actually utilize this massive power pack that they would actually have to have on their belt.
Cell? Yeah.
No, power pack. It was basically they strapped a car battery to their belts. And they were wired. They had to be wired into these power packs just to be able to use them. They were also not used a lot because they were very unstable.
That reminds me a lot of in the Fallout series, there was a very famous legendary weapon called the shish kebab, which was just like a flaming sword that you could utilize. They kind of fleshed it out in Fallout 4 by literally having like a backpack that you would have for like a flamethrower, and like it was like connected with a wire, and then that would basically be how they used it. So it's essentially the same thing, just a different type of power.
Yep. Yeah, for 15, like you have lightsabers wired. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, and they were super unstable, so they could just explode in your hand because they didn't have a good grasp of the technology yet.
Honestly, as terrible as that sounds, it sounds like it would be some really fucking cool fights because shit would just be exploding and like what people would be like getting stabbed by lightsabers.
The more current lightsabers have the inert power insulators and the power vortex rings would actually allow the power to stay within the lightsaber, the energy created, because it was a lot of energy. It allows it to maintain it. And it would actually discharge energy, and these insulators would actually protect the user from any electrical discharges that the weapon would inevitably produce. These earlier lightsabers, not so much. They would just blow the fuck up in your hand. Okay, we have 7,500 to 77,000 BBY. Not sure of the exact date, but there were further advances in lightsaber technology. They corrected the instability of the weapon, so it would no longer be prone to exploding in your hand. However, they had not fixed how much energy they use, so they were still corded to the power packs on your belt. In 6,900, nice, BBY,
Nice.
the Jedi developed the lightsaber to no longer require the belt-mounted power pack. 7,500 to 6,900 BBY, further advances like lightsaber technology, as we discussed. The Jedi did not develop the lightsaber to no longer require the belt-mounted power pack. It was the Sith who improved lightsaber technology.
Well, I'll be.
While it still required the belt-mounted power supply, it was able to be more utilized in combat than before, and it granted a superior edge against non-lightsaber wielding opponents.
Isn't it kind of funny that in the course of history, Jedi are usually behind?
I mean, they're monks, dude. Makes sense. They're peacekeepers. They're not worried about trying to fight better.
Yeah.
No. So the Sith actually made these improvements. They worked with the technology. Here's the best part. They did this 7,000 to 6,900 BBY. The Jedi were not aware of this technology. So they were still using swords. They were still using the belt-mounted power pack lightsabers. The stable ones, but that's what they were still using. Mm-hmm. And the Sith improved lightsaber technology. They replaced the belt power supply with an internal superconductor that looped the energy back into itself, which is what we talked about before, how it arced back into itself and essentially allowed the lightsaber blade to not expend energy until it was cutting something. Again, that was a Sith development. So the Sith developed two major advancements. They created the blade to be more stable, so it could be used and not explode, which is pretty cool. And they fixed the power supply issue that they had, because a wired lightsaber is still really fucking stupid. Yeah. They also, around the same time, they developed the double-bladed lightsaber. The early schematics of the double-bladed lightsaber were found in Sith archives, Sith history. Exar Kun came upon it. He was the first Jedi to utilize a double-bladed lightsaber. First. I guess he wasn't a Jedi at the point, but you understand what I mean. The Sith kept this tech advancement to themselves until about 5,000 BBY. Now, I have a question for you, Christian. Why do you think around 5,000 BBY the Jedi were introduced to the new technology of the now wireless lightsabers? What was going on in 5,000 BBY that would have allowed the Jedi to be introduced to this technology by the Sith?
Probably through fucking combat.
Yeah. Do you remember what specific instance?
Oh, what specific war?
Or instance? Incident. 5,000 BBY.
I've never been very good with...
We talked about it.
Well, yeah, but let me continue to say, I've never been good with dates. That's why I suck in history class. However, I believe this is this around the age of Coder?
About 1,000 plus years before.
So, was this the Sith, or the Sith Civil War?
I feel like you're right there.
It's like, I remember the sequence of events where a couple of the Sith had come back from the far outer rim territories and started encroaching back upon the capital planets of the inner core. And so was this around the time where that offshoot branch of that started creeping in?
The offshoot branch that you're speaking of, because you're actually mixing events, which is kind of funny. You were almost there. This 5,000 BBY was the Great Hyperspace War. That is when the two hyperspace mappers accidentally stumbled upon the Sith Empire.
Right, and the Sith ended up coming back down.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what you're talking about with the Sith coming back from the outskirts, that was when the Sith Empire lost that Great Hyperspace War and they were split into a couple different sects.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that one that moved off.
That was the last remaining one that came back, 1,000 plus years later.
Yeah.
Yep. But
so I'm wrong about that one.
Yeah, but you're pretty much there. Yeah, Naga Sadow, he brought the Sith screaming back through the Darien Trail right into the inner core, which allowed, and they were bringing with them advanced lightsaber technology. Now the problem was the Jedi saw this shit, but they did not have enough time to implement it into their own weapons until the end of the war.
Yeah, because they were under siege.
Yeah, exactly. By 4,800 BBY, Jedi were universally using the new technology. So,
that's interesting. So does that mean that when that offshoot branch Sith came in contact with them, they were on a level playing field?
By 48 BBY, the lightsabers that you and I and everybody else knows who's seen a lightsaber, this is when they were created. 4800 BBY is when the most modern lightsaber technology began. Well, it was 5000 BBY, but by 4800 BBY, the Jedi were using it too. Like, Jedi had completely no more belted power packs, no more exploding weapons, just good old lightsabers that everybody knows. The advancement of the lightsaber technology and the design with the lack of cord and the lack of instability allowed the development of the lightsaber forms. There was only one form that existed prior to 4800 BBY. That was Form 1. And now, Christian, we're going to be going into some lightsaber forms.
Oh, I thought we were doing this in another...
I'm going to touch upon it a little bit.
Okay. Get a little nibble.
Yeah.
A little niblet.
We're going to do a little crunchiness. I'm going to keep it kind of, not brief, but it's going to be a little bit of a soft churn. We're going to bring up a lot of things from characters that we all know, that are very commonly known.
Okay.
We're not going to go too much into the history. We're not going to go too much into, because they're all named different things. We're not going to go too much into that. You're welcome to ask a question, and I'll just let you know. I'll either answer it or I'll just say, we'll save that for a later time.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
One of my only contributions to this part of the conversation is the production analysis part, where George Lucas had initially wanted the fight between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan to be very samurai style, with both hands on the hilt at all time, and all their moves were two-handed as such. And from there, it expanded out into a crazy amount of things that we see now, which is you got like the freaking massage ventress doing some wild acrobatic shit to.
And we're going to put names to all those wild acrobatics.
Yeah. So it's gonna be exciting because you get
very fun.
If you're like me and you know things based on only what you see on the cinema and only what you see from like production history, going into the expanded outer rim to learn is quite rewarding.
Now, before we jump right into the forms, Christian, do you remember how many forms there are?
I do declare.
What do you declare? I declare you guilty.
If I remember correctly, there are 7.
Spot on. Yeah, exactly right. There are 7 lightsaber forms, both through the Jedi and through the Sith. That changes post Episode 6. After Episode 6, it changes into 3 styles because the Jedi Order, the new Jedi Order, as it was created, did not have access to the 7 forms. So they created what was called the fast style, the medium style, and the strong style. Later on, throughout the history and the growth of the new Jedi Order, they actually rediscovered Jedi holocrons, which had a lot of information on the 7 forms of lightsabers, so they would start to reincorporate the 7 forms. The only Jedi who might have known a little bit was Luke. He knew a little bit of the 7 forms, but he didn't have enough information on any of the forms to actually utilize them, so he created fast, medium, strong.
Like, he learned a little bit from Obi-Wan and Yoda, but he didn't know enough to teach a seminar on it.
No, he didn't know the different pieces and what made them so distinct, so that's why it was just fast, medium, strong. And that fast, medium, strong is post-Episode 6.
As they say, he dabbled.
He's a dabbler. Definitely a dabbler. All right. There are many different forms of combat, as Christian so wisely informed us. There are 7 forms of combat. We have
I had to redeem myself from the first episode.
So far, you're on a fire streak, my guy.
Word.
Form 1, Shicho. Form 2, Makashi. Form 3, Sorusu. Form 4, Ataru. Form 5 has 2 variations. You have the Shin variation and the Jimso variation. You have Form 6, which is the Neiman form, and Form 7, which is the Juyo and the variation of the Pod. There's also 2 others, which are not quite forms, but they're combat methods, I suppose. Jarkai is dual-wielding lightsabers, not double-bladed, dual-wielding. And Trakata is really, really cool. It's when you learn to fight, but you utilize the activation and deactivation of your lightsaber. So you'll be blocking something.
Oh, is that the one that was banned?
What?
Is that the form that was banned?
No.
Because the Sith, when you deactivate and reactivate to stab someone, was considered so vulgar that the Sith and the Jedi decided not to do it.
No, very few people practice it simply because it was just so fucking dangerous because you're deactivating your weapon, but it was to give you an edge in combat. So it's kind of like, you can akin it to how, some of those like martial arts or fighting movies, they'll be holding a knife in one hand, and then they'll be really cool and they'll drop it into the other hand, and then they'll have a new opening. That's exactly what Trakata allowed.
So what was I thinking of?
I have no idea.
Because I've seen that numerous times where it was one of the only like lightsaber combat methods that was disowned by both the Jedi and the Sith to like undo your weapon to essentially sheath, quote unquote sheath it, I guess. So deactivate and then reactivate to stab someone. It was
well, the Jedi definitely would not use it simply because it was so offensively intentful.
Yeah, and the Sith thought it was a coward's method, so that's why they
maybe
didn't do it.
There could be something to that. I didn't look too far into it itself, but I just loved it because I thought it's so cool. I think to be able to ride that line like that.
So and then Jar-Kai is like Aayla Secura.
In Battlefront 2, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she didn't actually canonically, short of that game, she did not actually wield 2 lightsabers.
Oh really?
No.
Oh, that was like my favorite part of it.
No, she wielded one. I don't know why that is.
Fucking fire charge.
Yeah,
strike.
Hot as shit. Oh yeah, that's spinning. Yeah.
She like had a mini General Grievous.
Yeah. Yep.
But with way more acrobatics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jar-Kai is dual wielding, so more canonically would be Asajj Ventress. Anakin in Episode 2 when he fought Dooku with 2 sabers, he was utilizing Jar-Kai. I can't think of anybody else at the moment. Oh, Ahsoka Tano. The Sith also utilized the 7 forms of lightsabers that we see on the side. Short of the pod, they did not utilize that variation. But they also had their own strong style, they had their own fast style.
Why didn't they use the pod variation?
Because, we'll go into it.
Okay.
Just holster that question. The Sith utilized, they had kind of just Sith variations. They didn't really focus on ones like Sarusu, because Sarusu is mostly defense, so they didn't really use it. They were mostly offensive, so they were known to use Ataru. They used Juyo, probably the most. Definitely a lot of Shen as well. Makache, and I'm going to Shisho. Shisho is a very different animal as well. Fast style, it's exactly that. And then there's something called Dunmak. Do you know what Dunmak is? Utilized by the Sith exclusively. Dunmak is not a fighting style. It's a method of combat, kind of like Trakata. They would unbalance their opponent emotionally and mentally by taunting them, insulting them, pushing them to, especially the Jedi, they would get them into a rage.
The psychological side.
Yes, exactly. It was psychological fighting. They utilized this with Jedi simply because the Jedi would become off-balanced and unkiltered if they were pushed into a heated rage of sorts because they were not trained to fight that way. Whereas Sith
does that mean that Darth Vader utilized it when he was fighting with Luke?
Yeah, tried to. Yep, that was a good example of Dunmak. You see it, Sidious uses it a lot.
Your sister. Then there was like, ah!
And then, as we talked about, the new Jedi Order, they have strong, medium, and fast style.
Righteous.
All right.
So, I've been friends with Tyler for quite a long time, my co-host here.
Hey.
And he has told me many times about these forms, but I've never seen them all written out in this neat list right here. So it's actually kind of cool to see them all together and to finally learn about them in a significant way. So I'm excited for these next few slides.
Yeah, there's a lot of... I'm going to try and keep this a little straight. It's going to be a lot of information, same as always. But don't be afraid to stop me with any questions, because each style is very different. Very, very different. First form. Form 1. Shicho. Way of the Sarlacc, also called the
Way of the Sarlacc, that's interesting.
Way of the Sarlacc, and also called the Determination form. It was the first form that was developed for lightsaber combat. It is the first form that is taught to younglings. So anybody who first picks up a lightsaber, the first thing they learn is Shicho. It was developed to adapt to new lightsabers. So what they did was, way back, they essentially took the combat elements of sword fighting and attempted to apply it to lightsaber fighting. As we talked about, lightsabers produce a gyroscopic effect, which changed the methodology of how it's used. It's not quite the same as being able to use it just like a sword. So Shicho will teach you things like body target zones, there's a big focus on not killing their opponents, but disarming them. So one of its most famous moves is called a disarming slash, where it's like an upward angled slash, which would actually try and actually destroy the opponent's weapon. As lightsaber duels became more frequent, Form 1...
It makes me so much more mad. Sorry not to completely cut you off, but it makes me so much more mad that we reinforce the concept of the gyroscopic lightsaber and then to have Finn just casually using it against his fight with Kylo.
I do not want to talk about this.
It's like mildly to severely infuriating.
No, it's not mildly. Yeah, it's so okay. As lightsaber duels became more frequent, Form 1 was retired and Form 2 replaced it. We'll get into that a little more. Form 1 was designed to disarm opponents, as I said. However, the uses of the form itself fostered a very heated emotional mindset. So, especially for the Jedi, you are discouraged from fully embracing Form 1 and becoming a master of Form 1. Every single youngling, as I said, was taught Form 1 just to give you the basics and the fundamentals of sword fighting until you moved on to specialize, essentially.
Is Form 1 what you see when General Kenobi in Attack of the Clones approaches Yoda to discuss the lost planet? He's teaching a class of younglings.
Yep. Oh, well, yeah. Blaster Defection, Form 1, yep. Shicho swordplay was very simplistic and raw. However, less adept practitioners displayed much more basic and clumsy performance of the form. In combat, it would encourage deliberate tactics, calling for continuous step-by-step advancement while cutting off your opponent's angles. So you're moving forward. Its offensive nature in its most simple form. Notable specialists and masters. Kit Fisto was a notable practitioner of Form 1. He was considered one of the highest masters of Form 1 himself. No, that's not forehead. And this is actually, Shicho was the reason why he was able to survive the longest, short of the second longest against Sidious.
Make sure you remove me saying forehead.
No.
Because low-key confused Kiai Mundi with Kit Fisto just now.
Shicho Form 1 also was best used against multiple opponents. Now, you're probably...
Is that one of those... Oh, so drawing on what I previously commented and you told me to keep it holstered, so does that mean that that's one of the reasons why Kit Fisto was able to survive a little bit of the Emperor?
Against the Emperor and General Grievous.
Mm.
It was to get best against multiple opponents, which is why he was so good deflecting 4 arms in a lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
Because his style and his mastery of the lightsaber specialized in that. And because of the wild and crazy attacks of Sidious, he was able to at least utilize his form for a little while.
For just a little, yeah.
Yep.
Much better than the other masters.
Yep. Sindralig, who was the battle master of the time of the movies, episode 1 through 3. So he was a master of Shicho as well. Yoda, who had mastered all the forms. Mace Windu, who also mastered all the forms as well. The wide sweeping motions of Form 1 being ideally suited towards attacking numerous adversaries. However, Form 1 was not as useful against single opponents, as such enemies had complete mobility and could find a weakness in Shicho's comparatively clumsy blade work, which is also why he still ended up dying.
Does this mean that Kylo Ren's pretty poor at Shicho? Because he was the opposite of graceful when he tried to use lightsabers.
I have no fucking idea what his form is.
Yeah.
I do not know. I tell you right now, I have no desire to actually look into a lot of that canon. I don't. So, that's my answer for you.
Fair enough.
So, as we said, Form 1 is retired as being a fully applied form. It was redeveloped and changed, and Form 2 is the result. Form 2, Makashi, it is the way of the Salamiri, and it is called the contention form.
Salamiri.
I don't want to go into that. We're going into that when we actually...
I feel like every question I've asked so far is that we're not going into that.
No, that's not true. But like I said, I don't want to go into too much stuff. We will save those questions for when we actually devolve directly into lightsaber combat.
Fair enough.
It is the second form of lightsaber combat. It was developed specifically for lightsaber to lightsaber combat. It had severe disadvantage against people that were wielding blasters. One of the most notable practitioners is, of course, Count Dooku.
G.
Yep. Count Dooku was actually considered one of the best sword masters of the Jedi Order
and
of the entire galaxy at the time. Yep. It relied on precision and efficiency. You can liken it to fence.
He 1v4'd while with a freaking dart in his neck with Night Sisters.
Yeah, he was pinnacle lightsaber aficionado. You can liken the form to fencing. It works in exactly the same way. They use precision, they use balance, very efficient, very direct. It was described as elegant and focused. It relied on balance and footwork.
It was also interesting because it was mostly, it was like not like those stocky samurai movements. It was very like one-handed.
Fencing.
Graceful, yeah.
Yep. The form fell out of practice for most Jedi.
Shakti,
Yep. This form fell out of practice for most Jedi as duels between Dark Jedi and Sith became few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
This and the increasing availability of blasters led to Jedi developing Form 3, as Form 2 does not compensate for blaster defense. It regained popularity during the New Sith Wars, which is Lord Khan, Darth Bane, but fell out of style as the end of the war and never regained popularity. So from 1000 BBY till 21 BB or until Dooku, nobody really practiced it. Last 1,000 years, there were very few, if any, lightsaber battles like that.
Is that partly because Jedi in the modern era didn't really duel each other that much?
Well, so you would specialize in these forms depending on how you would actually apply them to do your job as a Jedi, and yeah, short of dueling another Jedi,
it had no practical application.
Yeah, you weren't expecting from 1000 BBY till like I don't know, Phantom Menace.
You wouldn't expect it to fight for your life with another
No,
lightsaber.
no, there were no other lightsaber wielding
Yeah.
opponents, so there was no reason for them to practice it for application.
And even the Mandalorians who like fought with the Jedi, they didn't use lightsabers.
No, even still, blasters.
Yeah.
Yep, and this form did not account for blaster deflection, so they had to make a change regardless. Count Dooku thought lightsaber combat was the pinnacle form of combat of all forms, which is why he exclusively practiced Makashi.
And he did it right.
Yeah, and which is what made him such a...
one of the only people to take down Obi-Wan.
He could take down... Well, yeah, he could take down Obi-Wan easily. He was on par with Yoda. He was on par with Mace Windu, both of whom were also considered the best swordsmen. Sindralig, as we said before, who is the battle master for the Order. Asajj Ventress, who was taught by Dooku. Mm-hmm. And you talked of curved lightsabers.
Yep.
Curved lightsabers were specifically designed for Form 2 use.
I can see that, yeah.
And it allowed for a different angle
Much
of
more
blade.
graceful.
Yep. It fit more comfortably in the hand. It allowed for better control.
Faster.
It allowed for better control and precision of the blade. This is part of the reason why.
That would be really
Darth
cool.
Bane,
It would be cool to revisit a lot of the lightsaber fights after learning about these forms.
where you
like
actually pick out where they're using what. Yeah.
Like Asajj Ventress versus who's the green skin, dark black hair that helped Obi-Wan on Geonosis.
Luminar and Dooku.
Luminar, yeah. Seeing that fight would be interesting because they had very different styles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll go into her. I think she's coming up next, actually, if I remember correctly.
And Shakti, who's always double cheeked up, and we love her.
Double cheeked up on a Thursday afternoon.
On Thursday afternoon, hella ass.
Yeah, due to the, as we said, the disadvantage this form held for blaster usage, it was retired, and Form 3 was developed and utilized instead. Mm. Form 3, pretty cool form. Form 3,
oh, there she is, right there.
Sarusu. It is the way of the Minok and called the Resilience form. It was the third form that was developed. It focused on blaster deflection and defense. There was no real offensive measures to the form.
That's interesting.
Well, here's the cool thing. It relied on tight blade work and very subtle dodges and angling of the blade because you weren't necessarily deflecting bolts back to the user. You were simply deflecting to protect yourself.
Deflecting away, yeah.
Yep. Sarusu actually became to be considered the ultimate expression of Jedi non-violence philosophy. It worked on defending oneself until the enemy tired themselves or made mistakes. Do you know who is considered the master of Sarusu?
I'm going to go generic and say Obi-Wan.
And you're exactly right.
Aha!
Yeah. Him and Mace Windu.
I was hoping it wasn't like another obscure.
No, him and Mace Windu actually had a talk about this. Yes, Obi-Wan became a true master of this form, especially during the Clone Wars. I think this is when he fully developed it. Things changed for him after Qui-Gon died, and he developed more into the non-violence and the defense. And yes, he became a true master of Sarusu.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
I mean, he was really the embodiment of the Jedi philosophy, so
yeah,
it makes sense.
There are so many fights though where you can see him utilizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
especially with those like behind the back deflections, which are crazy.
Oh yeah. A user and a master of Form 3 can consider themselves being in the eye of the storm. So they're perfectly calm and just blocking everything that comes their way. Again, they would wait for the opponent to make a mistake or to get tired. This form was not discouraged, but this form changed as well, and things were developed afterwards simply because they didn't find it very safe to prolong combat, because that's all this form did, is it just prolonged combat, because you're just defending yourself, you're not trying to stop the opponent.
I thought that when it comes to deflection and I guess Sarusu, it's interesting because you saw that in the original 3 movies, because Obi-Wan, like, it's very effortless for him to do that, but you can see Luke kind of has a very, like, he has to hit them like it's like a bat out of the park kind of situation. Like, he puts a lot more effort into deflection than Obi-Wan, where Obi-Wan kind of does it, like, very willingly. Like, it's not, you can see he doesn't have much effort into it.
Yeah, the blade work is very tight, so it's a lot of wrist work when you're using it, because you're simply just moving the blade into different positions.
Yeah.
You're not swinging, you're just moving it to block it, because the bolt's going to be blocked regardless, so you're just kind of changing it, and then you're dodging and moving the angle of the blade in your body. It's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Short of Obi-Wan, obviously Sindralig, again, Battle Master of the Jedi Order, of course he's going to be Master of Sarusu. Luminar Unduli was also a practitioner of Master of Form 3, as was her apprentice, Barriss Offee, and Darth Zana, who is the apprentice of Darth Bane. Because of her small size, and because she wanted to wield a double-bladed lightsaber, Bane taught her Form 3 to make up for her physical disadvantages in a fight. Yep.
Would Anakin be considered a user of Sarusu?
Nope.
Back when he was a general in the Clone Wars?
Okay, so that's a good point. Just because you're a master or used one form didn't mean you didn't utilize elements of other forms. Because each form specialized in a certain thing about lightsaber combat. So Sarusu specialized in defense, Makashi specialized in lightsaber fighting, so it was very common for you to have it was very common for somebody to have an understanding of all the forms.
Right.
You would specialize in one kind of form.
Especially when you're being taught by one of the known masters of it,
But Anakin in particular, no. We will get into what he utilized for blaster deflection. Because there's blaster deflection and there's blaster, I would say, reflection.
Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Which that's fine. Moving on, we have Form 4.
Kuataru.
Form 4.
Ataru.
Ataru. Way of the Hawkbat, the aggression form.
It's Batman's lesser known cousin. Hawkbat.
It is the fourth form of lightsaber combat. It focuses on single opponents. That's where it's best used and best lived. It utilizes the Force for acrobatics. So think back to Episode 2, where Obi-Wan's doing the flips and shit like that.
Or when Count Dooku's doing this flip off the bridge of the...
Well, that's just a flip. But this is to utilize acrobatics during combat. It utilizes Force for acrobatics during combat and utilizes Force for Force-powered attacks, physical attacks during combat.
So whenever someone does Force-powered acrobatics, it's not necessarily due to them utilizing this form.
No. I mean, like a flip, you can't just say because you're doing a flip, that means you're doing a Taru. This is looking at the broad spectrum of somebody who utilizes, like, oh my god, a perfect example. God damn, Yoda.
I was about to say Yoda,
Yeah, Yoda in Episode 2, the perfect example. When he's doing the flips and stuff like that, he utilizes the Taru to implement the Force into his movements because he has to. Like, he doesn't have a choice.
One of the only times that you see Count Dooku having a struggle is because of how fast he's spinning around.
Yeah. Ataru is one of the most commonly used forms of lightsaber combat by both Jedi and Sith. It is very aggressive, very fast-paced, best used against single opponents. It does not do very well against blasters, much like Makashi. It involves a lot of physical strength, a lot of stamina, and utilizes the Force.
Which makes sense, because you're as fast as you might be, you won't be as fast as a blaster shooting at you.
Well, it didn't specialize in blaster deflection or defense. It specialized in offensive nature.
And acrobatics.
It did not have a lot of effective defensive moves, as I just said. It could not be used for a prolonged amount of time due to its physically taxing nature. Qui-Gon Jinn was a practitioner and master of Ataru. It was
ironic.
That say that, but it was actually one of the reasons why he died.
Because
he was too tired.
Another Ataru.
No. He was too tired. So Ataru works well in a few cases. It works well for short battles, and it works well in open spaces. Qui-Gon did not have that luxury. He fought a very long battle, and he did not have a lot of open space to utilize the jumps and the acrobatics and the powerful sweeping movements of Ataru.
See, this comes as a surprise to me, because in the movie, he did not do a lot of acrobatics.
No, it wouldn't necessarily. It doesn't necessarily, it would require you to do acrobatics, much like how Yoda would.
Yeah.
It's more with the physical nature. Like, he was a big man, so he utilized that. He utilized a lot of heavy swings, a lot of physical nature. He wasn't a Makashi user. He was a very active man, for sure. But
it's kind of like being a martial artist. You don't necessarily have to constantly be throwing a kick.
He would be more. So he was more in his element using Ataru when he fought Darth Maul the first time on Tatooine. That's when he was able to use it more securely. Even then, he was on the defensive, which is when he shouldn't have been, because he was being pushed back by how offensive Darth Maul was.
Not to mention the first Sith to appear in quite some time.
No,
Darth Maul, on the other hand, I can totally see him doing Ataru. I think he was one of the most movement-based lightsaber combatants I've ever seen.
Yeah, for sure. He had a couple things going for him. We'll talk about him more as well. But during the Episode 1, Obi-Wan was using Ataru. He hadn't quite looked at Sarusu yet, but it was actually the death of Qui-Gon that changed his thinking to, okay, well, I need to be a little more defensive because he died because I couldn't protect him. That's kind of his mentality he took from that. Sindralig, of course, Battle Master of the Jedi Order. He, of course, would have full knowledge of Ataru. Ki-Adi-Mundi,
Ki-Adi-Mundi is also kind of a surprise to me.
Remember from Battlefront 2 when he does this?
Well, Battlefront 2, yeah, but in terms of the actual movies.
Yeah, well, you didn't see too much action.
Yeah.
You haven't seen.
But in Battlefront 2, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, you didn't see him utilize it a lot. You see him more in the shows. Especially...
Yeah, in Battlefront 2, Ki-Adi-Mundi and Aayla Secura for sure.
Well, so you actually saw Ki-Adi-Mundi in the original Clone Wars cartoon.
Okay.
You see him. He fought Grievous for the first time when Grievous was introduced. You see the Ataru, and you see the jumps, and you see the physicalities of it. Aayla Secura for sure, all the way through. Aayla Secura,
Although it is really funny because I consider Ki-Adi-Mundi one of the coldest dudes, so chill, so like epic, but he's just butchered in YouTube poops to be the dumbest dude.
So actually, there's a lot of hate against him because he's actually kind of a dickhead.
Yeah, well, literally.
He's an asshole.
Yeah.
You say cold, but like cold is in no emotion.
Yeah.
He also had
what about the droid jacket? Please.
He also had a bunch of wives too.
I thought Jedi weren't allowed to have wives.
He's a Syrian. Syrians had a very low birth
Oh yeah,
rate.
he's a population thing.
Yeah, very, very low.
So he was able to fuck.
Very, very low male birth rate. Very low. He was one of a very few number of males, so he was allowed to have wives and allowed to attempt to
fuck.
Well, yeah, because he had to keep his species alive, so he was an exception. Aayla Secura, Yoda, we see Yoda in like any fight in the movies. You see him perfectly executing Ataru, which was his main form, and also in the Clone Wars in season 2, the Zillo Beast. When you see Yoda and Aayla Secura actually climbing around the Zillo Beast, they're utilizing Ataru. Qui-Gon, as we talked about, much to his demise. So as we talked about, Ataru is not very defense-minded, which led to the development of Form 5. Form 5 has two variations. You have the Shin variation and the Gemso.
It's a crate dragon.
Yeah, the Way of the Crate Dragon or the Perseverance form. It is the 5th form of lightsaber combat. As we said, two variations. The Shin variation is utilized for blaster deflection, more so redirection of blaster bolts back to their opponents, which is where Anakin comes in. Anakin was a...
I was going to say, and Darth Vader.
Well, Darth Vader, we're going to go into him when we actually go into a full episode of this stuff.
No, granted, Darth Vader was a fucking G that could literally block blasters with his hand.
Again, we're going to go into that because there's a lot of different things going on, especially with him in particular. With lightsaber, especially when he becomes Darth Vader. But again,
he's so fucking thick with the Force.
For a later date. Form 5 was actually developed from users of Form 3 who wanted to add offensive countermeasures to their lightsaber combat. Excuses. Woo, almost died.
Just by the time you make it to Form 7, you're up on the ground.
Form 7!
The way of the Jedi.
The way of...
We'll never know.
So, Form 5 was considered the most physically demanding of all the lightsaber styles. Lightsaber combatants who used the reverse grip of their lightsaber were practitioners of the Shin variation. So, Ahsoka Tano, Maris Brood, anybody who had the reverse grip on their lightsaber, which was actually actively discouraged, but once stopped, but discouraged.
Would Asajj Ventress technically be a reverse grip? Or is it just because it's curved?
It's just curved. She's not... No, reverse grip is when you're holding the lightsaber with the blades
because I think sometimes she does that with the blades behind her, but I don't think she ever adjusts her grip, though.
No, this is when you start... Like, Ahsoka Tano, in the beginning of Clone Wars, she almost exclusively used a reverse grip on her lightsaber. Like, the whole time. When you use it with the blade behind you, that's how you fight. That comes from this form. That developed out of this form. I don't know why. I think maybe because of the deflection.
It was probably... would you consider that... We talked previously in this podcast about the different types of lightsabers.
Mm-hmm.
The one that had that... I forget what...
Tonfa?
Yeah, Tonfa.
Well, you have the Tonfa, which is designed specifically for that. But I believe the utilization of the reverse grip played into Shin specifically because of the blaster. So when you're holding it like that, you have a lot more control. So you have a lot more control in terms of like, you don't have to move your wrist around and stuff like that. You can kind of keep it angled. And it creates a perfect flat blade for you to be able to redirect blaster bolts back towards their opponent versus Sarusu, which used the angling of the blade simply to protect oneself. You wanted to keep that blade nice and straight to have the best kind of like, you would think like a baseball bat and a baseball.
So it was a really good thing to have in the Clone Wars.
Yep. Sarusu, Form 3, and Form 5 Shin gained a lot of popularity during the Clone Wars. Lightsaber combat...
Plo Koon had a reverse grip?
No, okay. So just because you practice Shin doesn't mean you had to use your reverse grip. There were just people who used reverse grip came from this form. And there's also another variation, because the Gemso variation did not utilize the reverse grip.
Oh.
So Adigalia...
there's a lot in Form 5.
Yeah, it was one of the more popular forms. Ataru, I'd say Ataru and Shin. I'd say the last three are actually the most popular forms. Adigalia, Plo Koon, even Peel, Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Galen Merrick. Do you know who he is?
Galen Merrick. Merrick sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's Starkiller.
Starkiller, yeah. That's
the main character of Force Unleashed. They all were practitioners and masters and most common utilizers of Form 5. Syndraulic as well, of course. Battlemaster of the Jedi Order.
The more that I kind of learn about these forms, the crazier it is to think that there are some Jedi and Sith out there that have mastered all of them.
Almost, yeah. Well, yeah,
Pretty
like
crazy.
so. In the more current times, you would have Yoda, Sindralig, Mace Windu. They were probably the ones who not only knew them but had mastered all 7 forms. And then most every other Jedi knew of forms would implement different things from each form because, as we've been seeing, each form specializes in a different attribute of combat.
Mm-hmm.
So most Jedi would have kind of an understanding of each form, but they weren't masters by any means. They would mostly specialize, as we've been seeing. Like Adiglia, she would fall back on Form 5. So kind of thing.
Who's Adiglia again?
Adiglia, Jedi High Council member. She died in the Clone Wars. She was killed by Savage Opress. You saw the Darth Maul arc with Savage Opress?
I got up to a certain part of it, yeah.
Did you see the fight between... Do you remember Darth Maul when he had the weird robot legs with the claws on the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember when Savage Opress became his apprentice?
Yeah, met him and became his apprentice, yeah.
Yep. And then they were trying to gain an army and gain wealth, so he invaded the pirates, Darth Maul did. Darth Maul split Hondo Onako's pirate crew in half, and he's like, what if we take over the rest of the pirate fort? They're like, oh yeah. So they're going to that. Adiglia, Obi-Wan show up to try and stop Darth Maul.
Oh, is she the one with like the braid, the blondish braids? Yeah, tan.
Yeah, she's very tan. She's
I remember her.
And she gets killed very fucking brutally by Savage Opress. Yeah,
I remember. Yeah, because she's kind of shorter too.
Yeah, she got charged by him,
God.
and that was bad.
Yeah, no, you feel bad because she looks like just this little thing. She's just getting demolished.
Yeah, that was rough. That was very rough.
I do remember that. I don't know if I'm better off after I haven't remembered it.
No, it's not a memory. It's not like, oh yeah, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a thing.
But I mean, short of that, the Obi-Wan, oh my god. So speaking of, the reason why Obi-Wan was able to defend himself so well against Savage Opress and Darth Maul at the same time, he utilized 2 things. He utilized Jarkai, because he had her lightsaber too, and he utilized Sarusu. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I think that...
And honestly, because it's probably because of his experience with fighting Darth Maul in the past and then changing his form to adapt to it, bro was prepared.
Dude, that is, I think that's my favorite lightsaber fight of any of them, is Obi-Wan versus Savage Opress and Darth Maul. If you have not seen it, just look that up on YouTube. Obi-Wan versus Darth Maul, Savage Opress. It's like a 6-7 minute video. You'll see Adiglia die, you'll have a cry, and then you'll see Obi-Wan kick some ass. Moving on from Form 5, we have Form 6, which is Niemann.
Way of the Rancor.
Way of the Rancor, or the Moderation form. It is the
Which is ironic because Rancors do not have moderation.
It is the 6th form of lightsaber combat that was developed. It combined elements of the first 5 lightsaber forms that we talked about: Shicho, Makashi, Sarusu, Ataru, Shin, Gemso. All of those were involved in this lightsaber form. It was developed for Jedi who were more interested in studying politics, diplomacy, things of that nature, instead of combat. What made this form different was it had no significant advantages or disadvantages. So it's just kind of a jack of all trades, a little bit of everything. In order to make up for the very relaxed blade work of the form, relaxed I mean...
So yeah, it's like jack of all trades, master of none type of situation.
Exactly. You couldn't look at it and be like, oh, it's not good for this. Well, it's also not bad for this either. When I say to make up for the relaxed blade work, means they didn't practice the blade work a lot. So instead, what they would utilize a lot of force-based attacks within their combat. A lot of the other forms would utilize force in different ways. Ataru, Shen, Zhou, they would utilize force to perform acrobatics, perform flips, to imbue themselves with more physical strength for their attacks. But Niemann would actually utilize force push, force pull, stuff like that. Your success in combat depended on your creativity and improvisation instead of the trained responses that came from practicing other forms. So somebody who utilized any of the other 5 forms, they would move in a certain type of way. They would have certain trained responses to certain things. Niemann didn't have that. Since it was a compilation of all the different forms, you kind of had to make things up as you went along. People who practiced this form exclusively weren't focused on combat to begin with. They were just doing it to have a foundation of combat, try to keep them prepared for anything that might come up. So you had to really kind of look at your environment, look at your force.
Would you consider Luke Skywalker to be somewhat of a user of this, as he kind of maximizes chaos and the randomness of the combat? Or is that more just because it's situational?
That's just, we're talking improvisation in terms of situational. He wasn't a practitioner because he didn't know the form.
Right.
Yeah. Again, when we do a full episode about this, we'll devolve into all those like kind of
minutia.
Yeah, well, we could look at them like case studies because Luke Skywalker is very, very different. Darth Vader is very, very different. The dual wielding practices of Jar-Kai came from Neiman.
So it was retroactive.
Well, so they developed Neiman, or Neiman was developed, and then the utilization of dual blades, its foundations were in Neiman, and then it went on from there. Because Jar-Kai isn't necessarily a totally different form. It's a method on how to use two lightsabers, which is different because you can't.
So does that mean that? So just to reiterate, so you mentioned that this Neiman was created at around the same time that the double blade lightsabers came out.
Not double blade, dual wield. Two lightsabers, one in each hand.
I was trying to put it to a year for like 4,000 why? Okay. Well, that's strange. Because wouldn't that have been thought of prior to that?
No, I think
lightsabers?
It came up because of I believe the sort of jack of all tradesness of it. Because you wouldn't use. It's tough to use a lot of physical stuff when you have two blades in your hand, because then you're just focused on blade work. So you could almost consider even Makashi. It would be different too because you couldn't stay balanced because of the two blades. So they pulled off of the improvisation, the kind of no advantage, no disadvantage to be able to utilize two blades sort of thing. If that clarifies anything for you?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, well, using two blades requires a more creative, improvised way of using lightsabers than any of the other forms would allow you to use with two lightsabers. Anybody could use two lightsabers, but using two lightsabers, dual-wielding lightsabers, is a totally different beast in itself. Like two full-on lightsabers, not like Ahsoka Tano who uses a full lightsaber and then a Shoto, like a smaller lightsaber. Not the same thing.
No, like a Asajj Ventress.
Asajj Ventress would be a Jakar. Jar-Kai and Makashi, she did that because Dooku trained her. So, but yeah, Jar-Kai, Makashi for her, for sure. Known practitioners, Exar Kun. He was a Neiman practitioner before he became a Sith. He studied exclusively Sindralig, of course, Battle Master of the Jedi Order. Of course, he's going to know all the forms.
Sindralig's just going to be the entire list.
Yes, he is. But the thing was, he was quoted as saying, for anybody to actually take on Neiman as their sole form, it would take you 10 years to master the form. To actually be able to utilize the most effective. Well, to fully maximize its potential, take you 10 years. Versus the other ones, you didn't need 10 years to become master of the style.
Less combat oriented.
It was actually the most used combat form up until the Clone Wars for the Jedi, simply because combat was not really a thing for the last 1,000 years. In any form, lightsaber.
And like you mentioned, it doesn't have a whole lot of terrible disadvantages.
Exactly. That was everyone saw it as like
fairly safe.
Very nice middle ground.
Yeah.
I know how to use my lightsaber, but I don't expect to pull it out anytime soon.
Right.
It was not adapted in any way for open battlefield combat or warfare. Episode 2, Battle of the Arena in Geonosis.
Mm-hmm.
About a little over 200 Jedi, and anybody who practiced Neiman died.
Yeah.
There was not a single practitioner of Neiman that survived that battle. Not one. The only people that left specialized in other styles. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was only like 20, 30 survivors anyways. But anybody who used Neiman, they were toast. They couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
One, they weren't combatants to begin with, and two,
It's not exactly the... So do you think that, in your opinion, that Qui-Gon Jinn would have survived the Battle of Geonosis? Because it is an open area.
Well, yeah, it's hard. Yeah. I mean, he himself was a very skilled duelist. He dueled all the time. He dueled in the books. Like, he was one of the more... And he was all about adventuring and taking on missions. He was not a Jedi counselor. He was more a Jedi guardian. Like, he was very physically active. Mm. So I would say I would give him...
You would argue in that?
Yeah. He was also considered for the Jedi Council, and I think any Jedi Council member during that battle survived. Maybe except Coleman Trevor. I'm not sure if Coleman Trevor was on the council. He was the guy who got killed, who jumped up onto the arena, or jumped up onto the landing for Count Dooku. He got his lightsaber, and Jango was like, fuck!
He got the Mandalorian arm of the law.
He got lit the fuck up. Funny thing was, he was actually a practitioner of Form 3, so he should have been pretty well suited for defending against blast fire, but Jango... No. Jango's gunslinger extraordinaire.
Dude was literally the model of clones.
Yeah. Yeah, Exar Kun was a master of Neiman while he was a Jedi. Mm. When he discovered the elements of the double-bladed lightsaber, he built his own to do that, but then he also built it so he could detach them, like Asajj Ventress. That's why he became...
It took him a few shots, too.
Yeah.
Bro had to be like...
Funnily enough, there aren't any other known practitioners simply because most of them are dead.
Oh, we got the last one.
Yes, sir. Moving on from Form 6, we have Form
7.
Way of the Vornsker,
what's a Vornsker?
An animal, or the Veracity form. This is the 7th form of lightsaber combat. Much like Form 5, it has 2 variations. Juyo is the classic variation of the form. This was the one that was developed for lightsaber fighting. This was the one that existed for a few thousand years. They discuss the lightsaber forms a lot in Coder 2, actually. Juyo is also one of the most widely used styles by the Sith. It is very, very physically demanding, very aggressive, very, very aggressive, focused on almost exclusively offense. Only certain Jedi were actually allowed to learn and master the Juyo form.
What were the prerequisites to learning it?
Well, one, you had to not have anger issues in the slightest. You had to be considered
Anakin would have been off the table.
Completely. He was actually directly told that he could not learn it.
Yeah.
They straight up said, you're not learning this form.
Yeah.
Yep. Syndraulic said, you're not learning.
I'm not fucking teaching you.
Yeah, you're not learning it.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
One of the most popular practitioners of Juyo is our boy Darth Maul. He is, I'd say, the best example of Juyo.
Yeah, no, he doesn't let anybody breathe.
Yep. Yeah. He's awesome. Jarek Caden, he was in the Coder MMORPG. He was actually considered a living weapon. Dude was brutal. Of that day and age, he was top lightsaber fighter, for sure. Number one, GOAT. Syndraulic, of course. And then we have the second variation of the seventh form called Vapad. Vapad was developed by two Jedi, Mace Windu and Sora Bulk.
Sora Bulk?
Yeah, you wouldn't know who he is.
No, I don't think I've ever even seen that name before.
So here's the thing with Form 7, Juyo. It wasn't fully finished by the time we see it in the movies. Mace Windu took it upon himself to look at this and finish the form, and what actually ended up being developed was a second variation, his Vapad, which moves very different. Again, I don't want to get too much into this, as fucking cool as it is. I don't want to go too deep.
Right.
The form is very different, either variation. The Form 7 is very different from the other 6 forms due to the mental focus and emotional control it requires. Essentially, what makes this form different is the practitioner needs to enjoy combat. So you can understand why that'd be a problem for a Jedi who advocate peace. They do not advocate. Darth Maul was able to accept and understand his liking of the combat, and he kept that in mind 24/7, especially while he was fighting.
Came from a very combat-driven race, too.
Mm. The user of Form 7 rode a very fine line between the light and dark side, as it requires the user to fully embrace combat, almost enjoy it. And the intent when you use this form is kill.
Is that one of the reasons? Well, it's not to cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that one of the reasons you think that Mace Windu really had an advantage against the Emperor?
So, the Form 7 required a constant application of the Force the entire time you're using it. You can consider using the Force like a stream. You either have the valve on, you have the valve off. In other forms, you utilize the Force in very specific, deliberate manners. Force push, Force pull, Force jump. You use the Force to imbue yourself with more physical strength.
Speed Force.
Yep. When you're using the Force in application of Form 7, you're using it where you're constantly applying the Force, not just to your movements to give you an advantage in terms of physical prowess or combat capabilities. You're actually utilizing it to redirect the energy and the intent of the person. So it's almost like Tai Chi-ish.
Yeah. Tai
Chi, but if you were redirecting to kill somebody, which is what allowed Mace Windu to survive as long as he did and potentially defeat the Emperor. Mm-hmm. He was accepting the energy and the killer intent of Palpatine and putting it back on him. It's like a Force reflection. It's crazy.
The ultimate no you.
It's yeah. Oh yeah, yes, exactly. You had to be the line that separates the yin and yang. That's where they lived. Of the pod, there are only a few practitioners. The 4 that you see, that Christian sees, those are the 4 practitioners of the pod. Mace Windu, of course. Sora Bulk, who was a weak-way Jedi Master, also considered one of the top lightsaber combatants, on par with Count Dooku, on par with Mace Windu, on par with Yoda.
Why don't we see him in Clone Wars?
Because he died.
He died prior?
Right at the start.
Oh,
not too far in. He was actually killed by the last person on that list, Quinlan Voss. Quinlan Voss, he was taught a few things about the pod, and actually utilized it to defeat Sora Bulk. He utilized it when he was training with Mace Windu. Mace Windu stopped the fight. He's like, you ever fucking use that again, you're done. Mm. And then Diva Balaba, who is Mace Windu's apprentice, Mace Windu considered her to be better than him in utilizing the form. Mm. And actually, what ended up happening was she fully embraced the form.
Was she the one that appears in one of those Star Wars video games in the temple?
Oh yeah, in Obi-Wan you fight her. In the Obi-Wan titled game, you fight her. as part of your training. What ends up happening with Deepa Balaba, which has been retconned, you haven't seen Bad Batch, but she showed up at the beginning of Bad Batch. But without that story, what happens is she ends up going back to her home planet. She fully embraces the dark side and fully embraces the nature of a pod, turns to the dark side. Mace Windu has to go and rescue her. In the novel Shatterpoint, a fantastic novel, I have it on my shelf right there. Beautiful, beautiful story. Fully involves Mace Windu and his apprentice Deepa Balaba. And that, my friend, is all I have for you on lightsabers for right now. Do you have any questions, comments, suggestions, thoughts, theories, opinions?
Unfortunately, we can't go too far into these. But
you can ask some questions, but I'll either shut you down or turn you on. We're definitely going to do an episode that is dedicated strictly to the forms of combat, of utilizing the lightsaber. It's going to be awesome. We're going to go a lot more in depth into specific people, their fighting styles, the forms themselves, when they developed, how they developed. Because we touched on it a tiny bit as sort of a segue, but we can go a lot further.
Here's a question that you might be able to answer because we touched upon it earlier in the podcast.
Sure.
When they had the connected lightsabers to the power cell,
the ones that were the power supply that was
the proto ones.
Yeah.
Were any of these forms around back then? No.
Nope.
So not a single one of these was
developed.
These
forms were not used until the lightsabers were developed to how we know them now. So no cords, no wires. They couldn't be utilized in these ways because they were so limited. You got a fucking sword attached to a cable. Like,
that's what I was saying. Yeah, that's probably very
no, they couldn't. They had sheet show, and then they had normal sword combat methods and training styles that they utilized when they had swords. They brought it in. They really didn't consider how different the lightsaber was until it was developed to the point to how we know it now.
Another question: in terms of like the Jedi Masters, would you assume that is there an average of like how many forms a master would typically learn?
Almost any Jedi would learn almost all the forms.
For...
Juyo was an exception. Form 7 is an exception because you had to get permission essentially to learn it, simply because it's dark side nature.
Well, I didn't know if people had just simply used the Form 6.
A lot of Jedi did, especially in the time from, I don't know how far in, but I would say post 1000 BBY onward, Neiman was the most utilized form, simply because it was such a peaceful time. Probably the most utilized. The least utilized was probably Form 2, even less so than Form 7, because nobody was really expecting lightsaber combat. Short of the training grounds in the Jedi Temple. It didn't happen for the last 1,000 years.
Probably also weren't a lot of masters of Form 1.
There were probably more Form 1 masters than there were Form 2 masters. Form 1, again, is kind of like...
Because I know people got their feet wet in it, but...
Yeah, but again, you could take Form 1 further, just like Kit Fisto did, and become a master of the style itself, of the form itself. But Form 1 there are a lot of things that would turn people off from it. One was the kind of how emotionally heated you would get. You would get pretty, amped up when you're working with it, just like you would with Juyo. But it wasn't actively discouraged like Juyo. Yeah, you weren't actively discouraged like practitioners of Form 7 would be. If you were to watch somebody practice Form 1 poorly, it would look like shit. And you could see how disconnected it was. Like, you really had to practice it. It took time, which probably would turn people off.
Last question: how did people learn the talk shit method?
Oh, Dune Mach?
Yeah.
That was used exclusively by Sith.
Yeah, but like, where does that come from? Did they just tap into the dark side of the Force and said, because there's a whole lot of psychology involved in that.
Yeah. So I don't know how much I want to get into this, and I also don't know how much I could get into this. Like the development, the origination. But Jedi aren't going to do that. They're not going to shit talk.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to necessarily be in combat to begin with. Well, and I would say Obi-Wan, Master of Sass, would probably be the closest person. Because he would taunt people all the time. He would taunt Asajj Ventress. He would taunt Dooku. Like, he loved to talk shit. Not to the extent of Dune Mach. Like, he would do it to kind of throw them off their game. But Dune Mach, when you're utilizing it, you're trying to throw somebody off their game.
Yeah.
So it's like...
Twice the pride, double the fall.
I'm trying to think... Darth Maul.
The same actor as Saruman.
Darth Maul in the Clone Wars utilized Dune Mach. I killed your master, Dune Mach. Trying to get him pissed off, and it fucking worked.
I think he wanted that. I think partially that, and also partially because he probably wanted to talk as much as he could because he didn't get to talk much the whole.
Well, he could have talked. He just chose not to. He was exclusively, especially with Obi-Wan, he was exclusively applying it. He was specifically applying Dune Mach because he's like, I know how I'm going to throw you off. And he did. All of a sudden, Obi-Wan couldn't do anything. Like, he's getting kicked and shit. You could see how bad he was because he was pissed off. He's like, he brought Qui-Gon back.
In his head.
Yeah, exactly. Getting their opponent's head. Yeah.
Darth Vader did that really well.
Yeah, Darth Maul would probably be one of
Mostly because, I mean, to be fair, it probably came naturally to Darth Vader because Darth Vader, like, who the fuck would ever want to fuck with Darth Vader? Fucking.
He utilized it against Luke mostly. The Emperor utilized it a lot as well. Dune Mach was almost exclusively a Sith.
Did the Emperor use it a lot?
With Luke. He used it not.
Oh, with Luke, right. Okay.
Yeah, he was like trying to get into his head while
That's just because with Yoda, he just kind of blitzed him.
Yeah, no, he wasn't doing it with Yoda. He did not have time.
Although, to be fair, Yoda probably wouldn't have been that affected by it.
Bro, you saw that fight. He didn't have time to talk shit. He was trying to fight Yoda. Like,
yeah.
Like, you saw him on his face. He's like, fuck! you look, they do...
Fucking falling all over the council chambers.
They do close-ups of his face when he's fighting Yoda, and you actually see his concentration in his face. That's how hard he was fighting. That's how much of an opponent Yoda was.
Yeah.
Fucking cool. Count Dooku, same way, did not have time to talk shit with Yoda. Could not.
No.
You don't have time. You only do it when, like, you're kind of more on even ground with your opponent. Yeah. Or, like, at the beginning of combat before. Like, when Darth Maul, when he's above at the balcony, he's talking shit on Obi-Wan, getting it pissed off. Oh, now that he's pissed off, now let's fight. Because Jedi can't fight pissed off. They're not trained to. They're trained to fight peacefully. Right. They're trained to fight more emotionally controlled. You piss them off, now they're off balance. They're very off balance now. Do you have any other questions, concerns, comments, thoughts, theories, opinions, story dissection, and or production analysis of anything we went over?
I think we've wrapped this up pretty well, sir.
I do think so as well. I hope you all enjoyed our look into the lightsaber itself. I'm looking forward to when we discuss the lightsaber combat and lightsaber forms in a lot more detail. But until next time, thank you for joining us, and I hope you see us next time when I don't know what we're going to be discussing, but you can bet we'll be discussing it.
It's going to be in the Pandora's box, baby.